Good morning. Welcome to Wednesday Web Chats with Therapies of the Rockies. I'm Melanie Wiseman, a speech language pathologist and the clinic director here. Thanks for joining me again. We are now in February and we're going to spend this month talking about the kiddos again. We spent January really focused on the adults that we serve, different populations and ways that we can help them both in speech and physical therapy. Now we're going to jump back to those kiddos and see what kinds of things we do to support them in different areas. So today I wanted to address the big question of how private speech therapy ties in with kiddos who also get speech services at school. Those kids who are on an IEP or other types of arrangements at the school district to get support. A lot of times the eligibility requirements are going to be totally different, even district to district, but private speech therapists are held to different standards for what we can determine qualifies the child for therapy. When you're in the schools, a lot of what the speech therapists are going to look for are things that impact a child's education. It's their ability to access the academics that they need, things in the curriculum. And so the speech therapist is there to provide services to help them with those areas so they can better achieve that success. Districts are going to outline their own standards of what determines qualification for children, and the schools are also held to standards set federally, statewide, and by the district. Our governing body, speech therapists who are nationally certified with their Certificate of Clinical Competence, is through ASHA, the American Speech and Hearing Association. And they also on their website outline different qualifications for what therapists look for when qualifying a student. Speech therapists in a private practice have a little bit more flexibility in terms of what we can determine as eligibility requirements for children coming in to receive speech therapy. We have the flexibility to not be stuck on those school-based standards. However, the flip side of that is that the therapists are often tied to medical necessity as determined by insurance coverage. That is not to say that qualification for therapy is based on what the insurance covers, but the insurance covers things that are determined to be medically necessary. A speech therapist in a private practice looks at a very wide range of things, much like a school-based therapist, but we are often able to cover things a little bit more broadly than a school-based therapist because it's not tied to the academics. For example, swallowing and feeding are things that are not always addressed in schools, but you'll find them more so in the private practice. The way that we can work with kiddos here is by determining their needs overall. We get to work with the families. Is the child impacted in day-to-day communication? What can we do to support them to make them a better and more functional communicator? The question a lot of times that parents have is, well, my kid is on an IEP at school, he's getting speech at school, does he really need private therapy? And of course it's going to be case by case, but just as the qualifications for children to meet in order to get therapy in either setting is different, so is the type of therapy and service support that we provide. Many kids on my caseload and other therapists I know too also receive services at school through an IEP. And the thing that ties us together is that the child is getting that great amount of support in the school that they need in the academic setting, but they're also able to come here and get individualized therapy one-on-one with a therapist. And we can take those things that they're working on in school and be a little bit more focused on them in that one-on-one setting, give additional support to what they are getting in the school. But we also, again, have the flexibility to work on things that aren't necessarily just impacting education. Day-to-day things, functional communication, providing support, just a little bit above and beyond. So it's not always going to be in place of school therapy or that one is better than the other, because by no means is that the case. But a child being able to get private speech therapy in addition to school therapy is usually going to be a great thing because they get that added support and the ability, a lot of times, for the two therapists to work together to be able to communicate with parent permission about what the child is working on in each setting and how those therapists can complement each other with what they're providing to the student. So the big takeaway message today is about the fact that the SLPs in either setting are, of course, extremely helpful, and that they have different qualification standards for getting a child into therapy and different ways that they can support the child in therapy. And a lot of times these are going to complement each other, and it's not necessarily that that therapy in one setting is going to be better than therapy in the other setting. So always ask questions if you have a private therapist or a school-based therapist. Ask those questions. Don't be afraid to get information on how else you can be helping your child and different ways that you can support them. So thanks for joining me. Please feel free to drop any questions or comments if you have questions about the school stuff, the private therapy, how those two things go together. We'd love to answer those questions for you. Thanks for joining me today, guys. I hope everyone has a great week. And next week, we're going to be talking more about the kiddos and ways that we can support their speech and language goals using holidays and theme-based activities. So please join me. Thanks. Bye-bye, everyone.